Welcome to this week's episode of the Boss to Heart podcast, where we dive deep into the turbulent ways of entrepreneurship. Today, we have a guest who is no stranger to the very turbulent waves of entrepreneurship, of life. You've walked through a lot.
I have.
Gladys, welcome to the Boss to Heart podcast.
Thank you, friend. I appreciate being here.
So it's been interesting because the last few episodes of the podcast that we've filmed, I've brought people who were part of my kitchen table podcast to like, hey, guess what? We're doing things big now.
Yeah.
And so it's been cool to see that growth.
Yes.
Your company has grown so much. Yeah. You're doing so many different things.
Yes.
And you've been on this journey with me really since I started.
I remember.
Yeah.
In your kitchen.
Yes. And so Gladys, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and your journey.
Yeah. Well, Gladys, I've always had big dreams to be who I am, the things that God put in my heart to do. And then I was married and became a mom, had children to tend to, and we made a choice to homeschool our children as well. So growing a business sometimes has taken a back burner, position. Other times it's been center stage, and my children have been my cheerleaders, and my husband, we've come along. But I run birth hour photography, film, and doula. And those have been added along the way. That's part of the growth. And then I also have Gladys Garcia photos, and that's a separate from the birth world in the women that I serve in the birthing space and motherhood space. And then that just kind of takes care of branding and headshots. And really that began because a lot of my clients were business owners as well. Mm-hmm. And after their motherhood journey, they had this crisis of belief of, am I a mom? Am I allowed to be a professional? Can I still be a business owner? Can I be an entrepreneur? Can I work full time? Who am I now? This child needs me. So I've had the great opportunity to kind of grow into this influence role in this business, really, from a personal standpoint of myself growing into those spaces. And it has, it's never a linear growth. It's always, you have your ups and downs. And as long as you continue to grow in some ways, and sometimes growth it's not visible. Sometimes growth is internal.
Absolutely.
And it is okay to pause on the activities to work underground and get those basics and those foundational things going. So it has been since 2016. I have been doing photography full-time-ish. We can coin that full-time-ish. And it's been great.
So despite being full-time-ish, a couple of years ago when we met, there was a huge transition. So you were top birth photographer in the Miami area, from a search ranking perspective. Right. And then you've been in Orlando for 3 years, and you are the #1 birth photographer in Orlando. Yeah. That's not an easy feat, especially moving from South Florida, building a new audience, new referrals in a new area. What has it looked like of course you had an established portfolio, but what has it looked like to kind of have to rebuild in a new space?
Yeah. So that is true. When we moved to Central Florida from South Florida, it was really starting over, and I had to really come down to the basics again. Emails, face-to-face communications, having to coffee dates and just meet people face to face, gain their trust. But for that first year, I was still nurturing relationships that I had, clients that would call me, and I would end up traveling to South Florida for births. That first year, I had a few contracts already when we moved that I knew I was going to have to honor. And I got really good at, planning when to leave. Our communication became stronger. So I learned a lot more about client communications and mapping things out for them, helping them think ahead of some of the things that normally we wouldn't have to worry about if they're 30 minutes away. And that gave me a deep dive into just seeing them as people, seeing them as new parents, helping them meet those needs through just itinerary and communication. So I did that for a few months, and the back and forth became quite burdensome after, I think, maybe 14 months of traveling down to South Florida.
Like, it's a 3-4 hour drive, maybe longer. And then doing it with the pressure that knowing, oh my gosh,
there's a baby coming.
Yeah.
There's someone having contractions right now.
Yeah.
So I am on a race against a child being born.
Yeah.
So anticipating, traffic patterns, which way to go to minimize the risk of, checking on my oil, my tires. My husband has been an amazing support at this. But it's an event, and having a support system and also developing amazing backup relationships where I had other photographers in South Florida that I knew, and we became probably better friends after I moved, and bigger support systems for each other. We still call each other. So having someone 30 minutes away, 20 minutes away, on call, ready to go just in case, on standby, was also huge. When you start growing and venturing out and being adventurous and taking travel birth photography clients, we can't do this alone. From a photography perspective, but also just as a community, we need to be able to rely on other people, and we can't have that control that you have when you start making all the decisions. Sometimes some things have to go and other people step in. So
I think that's really beautiful. One of the things that I talk about often, and I know you've probably heard me say this before, is that we need to stop looking at people as competition and realize that there's so much space for collaboration, because when you operate in that lack mindset, like there's not enough, it's really lonely. Yeah. And the reality is there's enough food, there's enough business at the table for everyone to eat. Yes. And so what are some of, when you've started to build those partnerships, what are some of those things that you look for? And then what are some of those red flags that make you say, hey, like, okay, this isn't the right person to tap in for this partnership?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that question, I also wanted to add to what you just said, that not only is there enough work to go around for everybody, I can't possibly be at every birth happening all the time at the same time. There's plenty of babies being born. But also, I am a firm believer that only I can do what I do the way that I do it. We can have the same equipment. We can have the same, cameras, the same microphones, the same lighting, the same room, the same client. And if two of us went and had two births back to back to shoot, it would be different. Absolutely. Because I see people the way that God has gifted me to see people. So I anticipate their needs in a certain way than they do. And their strengths are different than mine. And that's where the beauty of collaboration comes into, when you can find, because they're not always available. You have to find the person that complements you well, where their strengths in their business would enrich you without having to copy each other, without having to be competition or taking clients from each other or ideas from each other, respecting those boundaries. That's one. Having clear boundaries of, I want to support you in all I can. I would love your support in all you can. And that looks like, reposting things, sharing what a great, collaborator they are, what amazing ideas they have, singing their praises behind their back, because they are worthy of that. They're working hard, just like I am. And being there to support somebody and elevate people, it actually makes me feel better. I think culture in the world has us thinking sometimes that we've got to put people down in order to elevate ourselves. Yeah. It's quite backwards. Yeah. Even from a psychology standpoint, that's the whole helping high comes from, where you're helping others. It makes you feel good. Yeah. And I think that something interesting also happens in that space, that you are able to, your creativity innovates within me, creativity of my own. So when we are together and bouncing off ideas, and when you have that synergy with someone and you're able to then there are sparks that are going off, and all of a sudden an idea that began small, it's now multifaceted and it is more impactful for the community that we want to serve.
We could do this.
Yeah. So that's the beauty of it. So a red flag would be the absence of that.
Right.
Flat conversations where it's, and I've had so many in the last, 10, 12 years, meetings with new and upcoming photographers that just want to sit with me and, can we talk about birth photography? Absolutely. I never turn down anyone who's starting that wants to know how to do this job. And I've had maybe, half a dozen conversations where I could tell, okay, maybe they're not going to quite have it yet, but they will. And there's been a handful of people that have been like, ooh, red flag.
Yeah.
And that's usually in this industry, you've got to be okay with, you gave me a sticker one time, people over money.
Yeah, people over profit.
People over profit.
Yeah.
And we want to be profitable, but that comes through hard work and strategy, right? In the moment when we are serving people, we still have to meet their needs. We still have to be able to go above and beyond and not be counting pennies as we're doing it. We got to be able to not give people, oh, you only paid for, this much. And you're like, oh, sorry, I'm done. We can't do that anymore. So having people that perhaps see this as I want to get rich quick kind of business, or someone who's like, tell me how you did that. Oh, and how did you make that happen? Oh, I noticed you posted that. How did you do that? Could you show me how to do that? And I think there is a place where we can do workshops and teach each other.
Yeah. That's
different. But if you have someone who just wants to, grab your goods that you've worked so hard at researching
right on your coattails.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a red flag too. Or someone who isn't healthy themselves mentally. And I mean, none of us are all the time.
Right.
Let's just be real.
This week has been a crazy week.
Yes.
I'm just happy to be here.
Yes. None of us are 100% all the time.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's grace for those seasons even. Not just days, but seasons where, you're working some things out. And in order to build higher, you have to check your foundation. And if it's not great, you got to deconstruct and build again. There's no work around that. So in the process, but you just might, you come across sometimes people who are just off the deep end in some ways, and they're just not well. So that's also a red flag where you're like, maybe it's not a good fit for me.
Or maybe just not in the season.
Right,
like,
not in the season.
I would love to work with you, but I think there's some things you need to work through.
Yeah.
And I think as leaders in our industries, we have to be comfortable with having those conversations.
Yeah.
We have to be comfortable with asking questions. And sometimes it's not even approaching things from an accusatory place, but like, hey,
loving honesty is kindness. Yes.
Yeah. Help me understand.
Yeah.
Why would you approach this way or this or that? And so, gosh, there's a lot of different ways that we could take this conversation. I know that mentorship has been important to you, even to a point where you were mentoring, and I don't know if you still are, but mentoring other birth photographers in your home and bringing in other specialists and things like that. And I feel like the birth space is really not a space that you just fall into, or maybe you do, but growing in it the way you have, because, we have, photographer, video, doula, it all takes time to develop that. And not everyone views birth as beautiful.
Right.
I know that there are still a lot of stigmas, even simply around breastfeeding. And so how did you end up in the birth space?
Well, I've had 4 children.
Okay.
That was really the beginning of it all. Me going through an experience, me going through a heartbreaking experience of losing a child during the pregnancy, the grief and the loss, me going through a few years of infertility with my husband, Me going through a season of cancer with my husband and then myself, and the grief and the experiences that humble you through that time give you a love and an appreciation for life like you've never had before.
Yeah.
So in the birth space, because my friends were having babies, I was having babies, multiple, babies. We were there for each other. Now, I think I was always drawn to the vulnerability in the birthing space because I began as a birthing coach probably a year and a half before I got married.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have any children then. So why would, out of all the places I could have volunteered at, why did this place call out to me? I think it was a vulnerability in just the way that God has gifted me to be in those places where maybe there's a loss of control and people, the mom in this case, it's just lost her footing for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to be able to be that grounding presence that could bring some calm, that could bring some information, that could bring some guidance in that moment, and just be that presence that grounds them again, was very empowering for me. It allowed me to mitigate some of my own fears, throughout the years. And then I decided after the birth of my last child that I wanted to pursue this. A great friend of mine who had photographed my three home births. Mm-hmm. She and her husband are amazing photographers in South Florida. And we've been good friends for many years. And she asked me, can you let me come in? I think it'd be great to get photos. And my first response was the same as most of the women now. No. Are you crazy? When you think of a photo shoot, you think, I'm going to do my hair, do my makeup, plan my outfit. In the birthing space, I have photographed women in full makeup, just to be clear. It can happen. But 90% of the time, it's not. And if you begin that way, it's certainly not the way you end.
Oh my goodness, imagine.
But also there's this progression and this growth in deconstructing the idea of what is beautiful. Mm-hmm. What makes me beautiful? What makes me valuable? And when I saw those pictures that friend gave to me, she ran to Costco the next morning and brought them to me. And I was just sobbing, looking at the moments I had missed, mm-hmm. because I was in Lala labor land and I was not in the space. I was not aware. The touches of my husband, the people that were there to support me. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but I had obviously 24 hours later, very vivid recollection of how I felt in that moment. Mm-hmm. The thoughts that I was having about myself and my ability to actually do this. And I was thinking all the negative things. But then I saw myself in pictures and I just looked really strong. And that is the strongest that I had ever seen myself ever mm-hmm. before. And that girl in those pictures didn't match the thoughts I was having in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I found that fascinating. It's kind of like, and then later, of course, the relationship between lights and shadows, and it kind of mimics the emotions that are happening in the birthing space. So it's a marriage of a situation that just makes it beautiful, but it defines who am I, why am I beautiful, and what is my purpose, and how can I present that in a light that tells a story accurately, and then minimizing the distractions, which would be a double chin or, nasty things around you. Yeah. From the right angles, being able to tell a story that is beautiful. Now, for the baby, I have to say that those pictures and those videos became for my own children. Mm-hmm. The base of their history, as human beings. Yeah. They love seeing themselves the day they were born. They love for me to tell them the story of how did it go again? Mm-hmm. What happened that day? What's happening here? What did I do? How did you feel? And then the ones that have video, not all of them have video, but the ones that have video just love watching it, and they rewind and they watch again and they rewind, and just seeing the expression that day in that moment, they were the center of our universe. Yeah. When else do you get to feel like you're the center of somebody's universe? Your wedding day, maybe, right? Like the birth of your children, where you are absolutely in that moment, and there's this blanket of joy and happiness that nothing can tarnish. Now, I also must say that is not the story for everyone.
Right.
That is not the happy ending that everyone gets.
Mm-hmm.
There are families that experience loss, and I've had the privilege and honor of photographing them as well and capturing that. However, I will also say that all those of us that have been through heartbreaking experiences and traumatic experiences even, when you look back and you see how much strength you've gained, how much character building that created, it's hard to say, I'm not glad that happened. I mean, I wouldn't choose it for myself, but I'm so happy I went through that because I'm better for it. So from that perspective, even that is beautiful.
Yeah. Even
that is a version of beautiful and deserves to be captured for them, for that family. Even the child who passes and isn't here physically anymore, they deserve to be immortalized in these photos and in these moments where they were the center of their parents' universe or grandparents' universe, and the unity that those moments create, whether they're super high in the mountaintop moments or really low. I think there's still stories that are worth being told.
God, that's beautiful. Like, every time I talk to you, I love talking to you.
I love talking to you too.
Because you always have you bring such beautiful perspective and the why. Like, the why you do what you do is so important. And I think we all have like a defining moment of the why. And I think when things get hard, that brings you, your why grounds you, right? In the times where I want to quit, things are hard. Like, it would be, I don't know how I'm going to edit these photos and get my kids through math today because I know you carry a lot.
Yeah.
You're also a chicken lady now too.
I am. 12 chickens.
So that brings me to the question. You've navigated a lot. And so we haven't talked in depth about your cancer journey. I think Sophie, your daughter, has told me more than you and I have talked about it. And so did the entrepreneurial journey come before or after you and Jack had your journey with cancer?
Before. Sorry. So I was involved in birth through that coaching girl in that ministry that I was serving as a volunteer before. But my full-time business came after Livy, which is my youngest child, and she was born in 2016.
Okay.
So I didn't become a business. We were both into photography before, but I didn't become a business until after both of our cancer journeys, actually.
So experiencing miraculous healing.
Yeah.
Navigating life as a mom. Navigating life as a wife, because that's a whole nother title, right? And that's a completely
hard work,
different position.
Yeah.
Because they all take something different from you.
Right.
I get asked all the time, like, how do you do it? And my kids go to school. Right? Like, I send them away every day. Like, bye. And then I'm happy to see them, at 3 or 4 whenever I see them. But you've made a sacrifice to do it all from your home. Your business is run from your home.
Yeah.
You care and love your family at home. You've provided schooling for your children at home. How do you do it?
A lot of coffee.
I love coffee.
Yes, we love coffee at the Garcia home, big time. God gets the glory for it all. I can't take any full credit for that. The capacity that I'm able to have to love my family and my clients and myself, that's another conversation to be had. Really, it comes from him. But there are practical things and decisions and boundaries that we've had to put around the house and around each other. One of my goals, and I think Jack too, we decided very early on when we met and we got married, that one of those foundational things, our why together, is
that shared vision.
Yeah, that shared vision is building legacy. That has always been for us. We used to coin a phrase that we used to tell each other, that we wanted to leave a legacy that would outlive us. And one of our dreams together is to like have a lake house one day that we can pass down to our children. And I've been collecting icon pieces of our lives, like our unity candle that we had to chop in half when we had a hurricane so we could use it after 2 weeks of no electricity. That has become an heirloom.
Florida life.
Yes, Florida life. But many other things that we've had in our lives, and I've been keeping, even things from my parents and my grandparents, clothing or Bibles or special books. I've been keeping them with the goal that one day we could have that space and be able to have those things displayed for them, that they could walk through the hallways and in their stories. And I think this is why I love being a storyteller. I was born a storyteller.
You really, yes.
And I think even after I'm dead, they will be forced to walk through a story of their grandparents and where they come from. I think knowing where you come from is important. So some of those boundaries that we've put for ourselves is we want to teach our children to be able to build a life they don't need a vacation from.
Absolutely.
But in order for that to happen, we have to get the daily things right. Now, we don't always get them right? Sometimes we wake up and we're in PJs by 11. Sometimes we're in PJs all day, just, being, yes. But we have the freedom to do that. However, everybody has their own working space. So we are teaching the children, thanks to Canva, we have lots of different chore lists and to-do lists that we post and we laminate and down to the youngest with little magnets. Yeah. Every day there's a flow and a rhythm. So we don't homeschool. We've never homeschooled as rigidly as some families do with, get up at 7:30 and from 7:30 to 7:45, you do this from 8:15. That block scheduling doesn't work for young children. So we learned to have a rhythm very early on. And it just includes time of prayer and meditation, like time alone with God, like being able to be together at the table and having meals together whenever we can. Now we have a home gym. So we are creating a space so that they know one of the things you can do when you're frustrated, you take deep breaths, go to the gym, get on the rowing machine, get on the bike, like exercise, like get that out, sit in silence and quiet. This is your space also. So we are teaching so many multifaceted skills at the house. My kids are picking up eggs. They're cooking their own lunches and meals. Sometimes they're cooking for each other. So they learn what it is to take care of each other. Yeah. And I feel like this is a very holistic way of doing life, but also learning business. Right. All of my children are a byproduct of being an entrepreneur. And I, Jack would agree with me, my husband, he would give me credit for that. Yeah. I've always taught them to see the value in their gifts and what they do and what that could be. So my kids always want to create a business out of anything. My son right now is selling eggs.
I was going to say, is Rachel still selling the eggs?
She gave it to her brother.
Got it.
But she's always inventing what kind of business she could have. Yeah. So when they wanted to buy a dog, I said, okay, well, put your brains together, give me a plan. And they had a PowerPoint presentation about what they wanted to do and how to raise money to buy this dog. And they did.
Everest.
How
is Everest?
He's big.
Is he?
He's so sweet. We love him. I love him least, I have to admit. He just licks me everywhere, and I'm not a fan of the licking. But he is so adorable. But that was their dog. They had to work together. Yeah. And I remember they put together a PowerPoint presentation of all the breeds that were hypoallergenic, because we won't have a child that's allergic. They put a presentation for their dad and I of, what are the top breeds and why this one, the poodles, why the poodles were the best fit for this family. Now, they were like little, like 9, 10.
I remember
9,
all
10.
of
Yeah, this is a few years ago.
Transpiring.
And that's public speaking right there. That is, budgeting. Mm-hmm. That is collaboration. That is marketing, because they had to reach out. Well, at the end, they had to reach out to their family members. And instead of saying, hey, can I have $20 for my dog fund? They had to present to them over the phone why they want this dog, how they plan to take care of them. That's a business plan right there.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we love to incorporate all of these things into it, but it does require for us to say, okay, now it's books down, pencils down, books down, iPads down, phones down. It's family time.
Yeah.
And we shut it down and we just change the atmosphere. Sometimes we use music. We have Alexas all over the house, and we play a song throughout, and that changes the mood in the house.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we get outdoors,
Yeah.
you know. Sometimes we just surprise the kids and say, okay, today we're just going to have ice cream for dinner. And they're like, what? Mom lost her mind. It's usually Dad, not me. But
So
gotta give him credit.
From a formal perspective, I know that your oldest daughter
Yeah.
has been working for you, and
Yes.
she's actually picked up gig work in our
Yeah.
shared circle.
Yes.
So I know that I listen to a lot of thought leaders, a lot of business leaders, and tax experts, business tax
Oh, yes.
experts, and everybody's like, hire your kids,
Right.
do this, do that. But you actually hired your daughter.
Yes.
You're paying her.
Yes.
And she has to deliver.
Yes.
So what has it been like managing your own child
Mm.
from a boss perspective,
Yeah.
not a mom
Right.
perspective?
So thankfully, we've built this mom and teacher relationship as we homeschool. So there are conversations that we have, and I'm, do this again. We're going to master this. You're going to have, and in homeschooling, the way that we do is sometimes there's no reason why you can't get an A on a test, because you have all the space, all the answers, you have the books, the resources. And there's very little times where they don't understand something. They don't get to move on like they do in school. Like if they don't get something, they don't get to move on until they actually understand it.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, paved the way for me to now have conversations with her as, okay, I am essentially your client right now.
Mm-hmm.
I am not your mom. So we're going to have a hard conversation this morning. Let's pour ourselves a cup of coffee. Are you good with that? And she's like, oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
She's like, okay, here we go. So we just have these, communication. And then there's other times where I just pour us a cup of coffee and we go sit in the porch and we just cuddle and hug. She's a hugger. And we just watch Pride and Prejudice, our favorite movie. We watch it together many times in a year. Like we'll watch it again and again and we don't get tired of it. So we have those mommy-daughter dates still where we just check in, and those times when, she comes to bed and lays with me in the mornings, but then we also have the hard conversations of, and I am very hard on her, especially because she's my oldest. I have to admit, I don't let her get away with things because she's my daughter. Yeah. I think it's the opposite. I think if she had another boss, they would probably be a little bit more gracious.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have a dual role of teaching this child to be responsible and also this is how you improve. But I never let her hang off the deep end, right? Without a lifeline. So I always bring the problem, tell her this is a problem because of this and this and this and this. How do you think that you can solve it? And then I let her kind of think it through. And then when she's done, I'm like, well, here's what I think. I think that you could, my opinion, I think you could do this and this and this better as well.
I think that's setting a standard for healthy relationships, that employee, employer, clients, contractor, relationship. I think it sets a healthy standard, because really that's the way all of our working relationships should be.
Yeah.
Healthy boundaries, accountability, opportunities to improve, safe places to fail. Like, you didn't do this right. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Yeah. It has been great for me as well, because she's my child and I get so much satisfaction of her improving one of my ideas.
She's
in
creative.
a healthy way. She's very creative.
She's
and
really
sometimes, she thinks we should do something differently. And I'm like, no. We're not doing that. But then I'm thinking about it, and she's obviously much younger than I am. And I'm like, let me think about this. The more I think about it, I feel I am growing by watching her develop her own creativity, her own way. And there are times where she tells me no. where she's like, no, I don't think we should do that.
Yeah.
And being able to hear no's, with respect for each other is also very valuable and enriching.
I love it. Why no? Why?
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay.
Yeah. So Gladys, I know you said you and Sophie's favorite movie is Pride and Prejudice. I'm a boy mom.
Mm.
Our favorite movie right now is Shang-Chi.
Oh.
We love the Marvel movies. If you haven't seen it, anything with dragons, like Shang-Chi is Marvel meets Harry Potter-ish. I don't know. Maybe that's not. But I love it because it's Marvel and then there's mystical dragons, all that stuff. But going off of Marvel, you have the movie Infinity War, right? Where Thanos snaps his fingers and half the population disappears. So on the podcast, we are having our Thanos moment.
Okay.
But instead of snapping your fingers and half of the population disappearing, they just have to stop and listen, and they have to hear and they have to understand what you're saying. You snap your fingers. What do you want them to hear?
Be kind to yourself. Believe in yourself. Early on, doesn't matter what people say about you. It doesn't matter what the world thinks. You have to know who you are and why you are what you are. Your purpose, buy into it. Don't second guess that. Don't let the voices that have been said over you wash over that little instinct or that little voice that tells you to go for that or to take a risk.
Yeah.
I think I second guessed myself so much, especially when I was younger, and even now sometimes, and I have to
get into that.
No, right. But I have to look in the mirror, sometimes and say, no, that is not true. Yeah. So that's what I would love everyone to hear, is just trust in the purpose that you've been given. You don't have to have all the answers. And I think sometimes we want them, but we don't need them. So being comfortable in that uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being comfortable in the uncomfortable. It is a gift.
It is.
And I think if we leaned more into that discomfort of the unknown, we would just find that we can fly.
Yeah. It's not so scary once you jump.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gladys, this has been amazing. I could talk to you forever. We could go forever. But you are top birth photographer in Orlando, multi-award-winning photographer,
Thank you.
Nationally recognized, all the things, plus brand photographer. So if you need a amazing photographer who can take natural looking shots, nose lighting, get your best elements, Gladys is your girl. So if people want to talk to you, they want to touch base with you.
Thank you.
What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email GladysGarciaPhotos@gmail.com.
And what's your website?
I have my birth hour website. So it's birth hour like the time, HOUR. Yeah. birthhourphotography.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Boss Too Hard podcast. Remember, if you can give yourself any gift, it's to be kind to yourself and believe in yourself. We'll see you next week.